So we've been going through all the Patreon listener question queues, and we've had a whole bunch of really good ones the past couple of days. Just been fueling the podcast with some great questions from all the people here on Patreon. And we have another one here, and this is a really good one too, from David Cabal, probably our biggest fan on the podcast. David, love your enthusiasm and everything that you put towards us in the podcast, and it's always great to have you listening. So David Cabal from the Patreon Listener Questions asks, because Hasbro now owns the rights to Power Rangers, how would you imagine Power Rangers if they did some kind of crossover with Transformers? What would the story be like? So the way I'm going to tackle this one, and I've had this idea in my head ever since the moment that I found out that Power Rangers and Hasbro were going to be one, and how in my mind I was like, well, the inevitable is going to happen, because Lord knows Transformers has crossed over with a lot of stuff already since then. I mean, we've had Ghostbusters, we've had Evangelion, we've had G.I. Joe. I know I'm forgetting like at least 20 others from My Little Pony, not My Little Pony, Hello Kitty and Disney. Like there's just been so much, but not a lot of them really have been tackled properly in a fictional standpoint, let alone from a rational fictional standpoint. And the way that I'm going to tackle this question is the same way that I imagined it when this news first broke all those months ago. God, it feels like, I think it was like over a year ago now. And I see it that if Hasbro really wanted to do some kind of storytelling fiction, the most rational way they would go about it, at least initially. You know, I mean, we could see where it could grow from there, but I think initially the smartest thing they could do is first tackle it from a comic book perspective. Turn to IDW and go, hey, yo, let's do something. Now, obviously, this is where, like, again, my rational thing kind of comes in, where it's like, well, Boom Studios right now is the comic book company that's handling the Power Ranger property, not IDW. But let's say Boom, rented them out temporarily and IDW could do something, or it could be an IDW Boom production, collaboration. I imagine it being a series of books, not just one miniseries, but multiple miniseries. I imagine a, what is the term? Quartet? Quadrilogy? Whatever you want to call it. There's, I think, tetralogy. Someone coined the term. Four miniseries, I imagine. And each one a progression of story. How it would be done would be you pretty much reboot Power Rangers and start it from the beginning, Mighty Morphin 1993, and it would just be the same story from those humble beginnings, but with the Transformer twist on it. And from a marketing standpoint, you do it logically, pretty much use Power Rangers as its base, and then you wrap Transformers as thousands of different robot designs around that Power Ranger base. And what I mean by that is we start with Mighty Morphin. It's dinosaurs. It's that prehistoric thing. You could easily start a whole story where it's the Rangers, and you have the whole Rita Repulsa thing, or Witch Bandora if you want to go on the Japanese route of it. And you could have that whole story play out, but as that's playing out, you have that whole, let's add now the Transformer aspect in it. Stasis pods crash on Earth. It's Earth 1993, Angel Grove. The Dinobots show up. And that's the only Cybertronians that exist, is the Dinobots show up, Grimlock and the crew. And they join the Power Rangers fighting off against Rita. And then, by issue 3, you have Megazord show up and the whole turn from that. And it ends with that, pretty much. We go that whole Mighty Morphin story with just the Dinobots. And then we go to, we'll call it season 2, the Thunder Megazords and stuff like that. And that'll be the second series of books. After this first series of books hopefully finds success, that they want to do a second series. And that would be more an excuse to bring in Beast Wars related characters. So because of the more mystic nature of the Thunder Megazord, because it was a unicorn or a Pegasus. I mean, some people were like, really? That was a unicorn or a Pegasus? Yeah, that's what the legs were. An Asian kind of lion and a mystical dragon. Again, Die Ranger, which is what Season 2's Thunder Megazord stuff was based from, was very mystical Asian, more specifically like Chinese creatures and stuff like that. And same thing, the Phoenix, instead of it being, the traditional Kimberly pterodactyl, stuff like that. And we could bring into that, because it's a comic and we don't really have to worry about trademarks or toys that are going to be coming out anytime soon. We could go, we could bring in some of those fuser characters that really kind of were in a lot of ways also based in mysticism and that kind of stuff. So even, wouldn't it be cool to bring back like a Beast Wars Silverbolt or some of those? Now, again, I'm not picking anyone specifically. And of course, scale is a whole other issue too, because when you're talking like a combined Megazord, it's way taller than any Transformer outside of City Bots and stuff. But at the same time, like, those individual, going back to, let's say, Mighty Morphin, those individual Dinozords could easily kind of go like, at least in certain cases, the scale could work for the Dinobots, with the exception of, I guess, the T-Rex Megazord, Tyrannosaurus, and Dinobot would probably be, not Dinobot, Grimlock would kind of be out of scale with each other. But, you can have fun with the scale. It's a comic. It's a reboot. You could do something different. But getting back to Season 2, so you could kind of play with that, and now you have Lord Zed, so he's the new big bad, and now these more stasis pods that are showing up, reinforcements from Cybertron, and they're working with the Dinobots who are there already. Grimlock is still the lead head at this point, and he's already familiar with the Rangers, and at this point, because it's Season 2, you could also write out what's going on with the human characters on the Power Ranger side. So Jason and Zach and Trini, who in real life in the show, they walked off, and they got new actors. You could kind of write in that they died, or, they had to do something. There's different ways you could tackle it depending on how the story builds up from the original miniseries. But you could also change up the human Rangers to match that too. Again, it's all based in Power Rangers and Transformers wrapping around it. And then afterwards, Lord Zed's got beat up. We're moving. We could go to, let's say, the Alien Rangers. But do you want to go with the ninja stuff? Do you want to include movie-only continuity stuff like Ivan Ooze? Or do you want to kind of ignore the Kaku Ranger, Alien Ranger, ninja stuff and then jump into, which I would kind of think would be just better, jump into Turbo Ranger. And then when you jump into Turbo Ranger, the third miniseries that we would be doing, or, the next series for Power Rangers, then you could bring in the vehicles. And when you bring in Turbo Ranger and you bring in the vehicles, that's when Optimus Prime shows up. That's when Hot Rod shows up. That's when RC shows up. And again, I'm going with the color coordinating here, where it's like, Optimus Prime, even though he's the red truck, like he could be more the leader kind of vehicle, but we're going to have Hot Rod kind of be the foil to the Red Ranger's, turbo car, if you will. And same thing, we'll have RC involved. For blue characters, maybe we'll bring in Blur. It's really something where you'll see how the story progresses and then figure out which characters you'd want to bring in. And it's the same thing. Now you have the Turbo story. You're going up against a new set of villains, folding all that into that, and all of that concluding with the final chapter, the final miniseries of going into space. And that is now going into space, but now we're going to Cybertron. And you have the in-space Power Ranger stuff, and you have the going to Cybertron, where now that opens it up to every character. And you have to ask yourself all this time, well, where are the Decepticons in all of this? You've told this whole story of like the Transformers against, Power Rangers as villains. And I think that that's where the buildup happens, is when now the Power Rangers go to Cybertron. We learn that all this time, these first 3 series, Cybertron's been ruled by the Decepticons, and they won the war over there. And by the Transformers being on Earth and making these new allies with the Power Rangers, with their Zords and the Morphin Grid, they could go back to Cybertron with them. And now that the Transformers have helped the Power Rangers win their war on Earth, now the Power Rangers could go with them back to Cybertron and win the war against the Decepticons. And they bring all of their plethora of robot tech and stuff like that. And just like how you have the opening of the Matrix of Leadership that kind of helps, win the war against Unicron, stop everything, the destruction of Zordon and his, I guess we'll call it his time tube, and how that spread across in space. Again, for people who aren't Power Ranger fans, oh man, it's like a spoiler. I'm sorry if I'm saying this, but at the end of In Space, Zordon's tube gets destroyed. It spreads like energy across the universe and purifies all the evil and makes evil good and stuff like that. Almost very, very similar to that of the Matrix of Leadership. And so we could kind of have a parallel to that with the Matrix of Leadership now that Prime showed up in Turbo, and now he's available there with the Matrix of Leadership, and somehow bringing Zordon with in the in-space continuity, where we could have maybe Zordon merge with the Matrix of Leadership, so he's present there, the grand knowledge of Zordon and everything, and the Matrix of Leadership with Primus residing inside it. There could be some kind of connection there. And it all concludes with the in-space miniseries, the final part, the 4th part, with some big fight with Megatron, and then maybe Serpentera gets involved, and that also involves Unicron. There's many ways that one could tackle that final one, but we'd only be looking at that final chapter after we really fleshed out those first other chapters of Mighty Morphin, Thunder Megazords, and Turbo. So that's one way how I would tackle it. And again, if people would really enjoy it, then that's something afterwards if you want to make original toys. If at some point in, let's say, that first chapter with just the Dinobots, if there was some kind of, fusion Transformers Dinobot technology that goes up against the Dragonzord, and we have a unique design out of it, and then Hasbro wants to make a toy of that unique design, hey, all the better. I mean, we had a Ghostbusters comic book which resulted in a Masterpiece Optimus Prime done in Ghostbuster colors that then made an appearance in the Ghostbusters comic. And then, of course, the original Ghostbusters Ectotron on top of that. So it wouldn't be a surprise if there'd be at least one unique toy that would come out of this, and a unique mold that then can end up being a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, and then end up at, Best Buy or GameStop or whatever, unique places would want to carry a unique geek product. Maybe even something at, Hot Topic, you know what I mean, if they want to carry it. But it's something that I'm sure a result of all of this would lead to at least one toy from Hasbro. Not many toys, not an entire line, but at least one toy. And it's something also that won't anger the Japanese side with what Bandai is still doing with the Sentai stuff, because it'll be an original design made just for the American audience, and that boom/IDW continuity that would be created. And if somehow all of this gets some kind of traction, if they want to do, I don't know, maybe a web exclusive CG short, maybe a Machinima exclusive or Netflix exclusive CG short. If they want to do, they had, I think it was the Morphin Grid. They had a cell phone game where if they want to just include that unique character that's made for the toy line in that, just to kind of give something extra for the fans. There's so many ways that you could tackle it from a business standpoint, but that's just how I looked at it as a whole. And I feel like I'm just giving away all the good ideas here, but it's that's really how I would have tackled it, is a nice quartet or quadrilogy of books, assuming that the first set of books even does well. And then that would be the grand picture for a story, for a Power Rangers / Transformers crossover. And, again, it would all just end with some big opening of the Matrix of Leadership / Zordon energy beam conclusion. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell, pretty much. So thanks again, David, for the Patreon listener question. Once again, if you're interested in being part of the Patreon, check out the description below. We have a whole bunch of cool tiers, and you could even ask a question on the podcast where I will flesh it out as best I can with my crazy knowledge of all of these brands and working within the brand all those years. But yeah, thanks again. Awesome question. And I'm curious to hear what other people would do if these two brands clash together.